Lamar Jackson has been at the center of controversy with his OTA absences. We talk about why it's not a big deal and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. It includes in video form on YouTube and in audio form wherever you get your shows. We're here for you 5 days a week, plus more Ravens news, analysis, updates. We go live after every single Ravens game and after every piece of Ravens big news. We got bonus episodes, a lot going on here on Locked On Ravens in the best way possible. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Make everyone want more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We're back, another Monday edition of the show. Really appreciate everybody again for being here, making us a part of your day, whether you're an everyday or you listen every single day. Thank you for consistently tuning in. If you're a first-time listener, welcome into the show. If you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back. There's been controversy. There has been controversy about Lamar Jackson over the past couple of weeks due to his OTA absences. It's not something I want to, just go detail after detail. There's really not that much detail to go into, but it's something I think we have to address. I talked about it a little bit on Friday, but we have new, updates from Mike Florio, or as Lamar Jackson calls him, Mike Flores, and just a bunch of national media controversy with, Lamar Jackson's not showing up to OTAs. It's been a major storyline. It seems like Lamar is just like, it's one thing on top of the other for him, and it's all not big of, it's like none of them are big deals. None of it is a big deal. We have stuff about him, quote unquote, downplaying the Chiefs, stuff about him in the weight. Is he going to get injured? And then now we have the stuff about the OTA controversy. It seems like the national media and Lamar Jackson, it's just, okay, how can we do this with Lamar? I don't know. So we're going to talk about Lamar's OTA controversy. We're also getting to some of the other points as well. My personal stance is not a big deal, as you heard there in the opening. So we'll talk about that. But again, not go into too much detail on it. Then we're going to get into Calais Campbell, or just some pass rushing options, both interior and exterior for the Ravens. Could Calais Campbell come back? Should they be looking at other pass rushing options and more? And then finally, we're getting to some early expectations for this team. I think there are a bunch of different schools of thought for what the expectations around this team should be. I have my opinions. Of course, everybody else has theirs. We'll get into what I have to say about it. And then if you have, any specific expectations you have, feel free to comment it down below on YouTube. You can shoot me a message on social media, at me on social media. It's something where I'm open to the conversation about anything, honestly, 100%. So let's talk about Lamar, the controversy. Long story short, the development over the weekend is that this article came out from Mike Florio. He reported that Lamar Jackson's contract includes a condition where he must participate in 80% of offseason workouts to earn a $750,000 bonus. And he got a lot of flack for not showing up and, he's sacrificing this money and he's not being there for his teammates. And look, I think we have to put this in perspective, right? Lamar Jackson signed a $260 million deal last April, right? It was the biggest contract in Ravens history. Well, we talk about this all the time with fines, like when guys get fined $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, compared to what, the average salary is in the U.S., it's not a ton when you compare what these guys are making total versus the fine. Obviously, it's still a lot of money, right? That's still a lot of money. $750,000 is an astronomically big amount of money. But for Lamar, if that clause is in his contract, again, this is Mike Florio reporting this, or Mike Flores, as Lamar Jackson calls him. But with Mike Florio saying this, it's like, okay, first of all, it's Lamar Jackson's money, right? For me and for everybody, look, the organization, they want Lamar to be there. If I had a preference, sure, right? I'd love for Lamar to be there with his teammates, but I'm not going to be nitpicky about it because it's voluntary. Sam Acho on ESPN, Emmanuel Acho's brother, he was asked, do you have any problem with Lamar not being there for OTAs? Do you have any problem with him not showing up? And he's like, no, I have no concerns. There are no worries because of the voluntary part. If we hit mandatory minicamp and Lamar Jackson isn't there, it's a different story. But why would Lamar not be there for mandatory minicamp, right? It's him. And it's also, we see him working out with Zay Flowers. There are clips, multiple clips of him throwing down in Florida, other places. It's not like Lamar just isn't working while he's away from the team. Obviously, it'd be great if he was to be working with the coaches and working with his teammates and whatnot, getting some of that rapport. But OTAs are also, vets can benefit from them. I'm not saying they can't, but it's more beneficial, I'd say, to the younger guys, and especially for an offense that is going to have, you're talking about the offensive line, you're figuring out some of the stuff as well with these running backs, where what is Rasheen Ali's role going to be before Keaton Mitchell comes back, Justice Hill. Yeah, it'd be unquestionably incredible if Lamar and Rashad Bateman were to go get some chemistry together, right? I would love that for them. But if they both stay healthy, there is still going to be plenty of time for them to get on the same page once the mandatory stuff starts up. There are other veterans not named Lamar Jackson who are not at OTAs. There are sometimes other quarterbacks that do not show up to their team's OTAs. Some quarterbacks do, other quarterbacks don't. Some offensive linemen do, other offensive linemen don't. Some defensive players do, others don't. But there is this spotlight on Lamar. And it seems to always be there for him. It's not a big deal to me because Lamar's doing his own work. Guys just have teams, right? There are plenty of guys who don't show up to OTAs. Now, Lamar also did show up during that first week. He was there. It's not like he just, blew him off altogether. Now, there's no contract situation where I know when we were talking about Lamar's contract a couple of years ago, it was, he's probably not going to show up until he gets a new deal. And whether that was message sending or whatever it may be, it's a different situation now. But again, it's not something I'm going to go into too much detail about over the OTA absences because, sure, you know what? If he lost $750,000, that's his decision. And while not everybody might agree with it, to me, I'm going to say that it's something that I'm not losing sleep over because you're still going to have Lamar be there for all the mandatory stuff. So that's where I am on that. Now, the other part, Plaxico Burress was on a show and ended up talking about now how he did not like Lamar Jackson, quote unquote, downplaying the Chiefs, where if you had missed the quote, he ended up saying, he was asked about, playing the Chiefs in week 1. And he, I guess to some people downplayed it, was like, be ready for anybody and this, that, and the other, regular season versus playoffs. And Plaxico Burress essentially said, well, you have to find out a way at some point how to beat this team. And when did not losing football games not become a priority and all this different stuff? Or not winning. I think I said not winning is what I think he said. But at the end of the day, Lamar didn't downplay anything. His comments, I think, were taken out of context there. And we see this all the time. And it's not just Lamar in terms of comments being taken out of context. Like, that always happens. But Lamar wasn't disrespecting the Chiefs or saying that, it's whatever. Obviously it's a big game and he knows it's a big game, but he's not going to put too much stock into that one singular game and have all this stuff. It feels like Lamar can't escape the national spotlight for some reason. And whatever it is, part of it is just okay, well, what's he doing to be in the national spotlight? And you kind of look through the notes and you're kind of thinking, you're like, why is he in the spotlight for this? Why is this particular comment taken this way? Or why is this particular action taken that way? There are always stories behind it. There are always storylines behind it. Obviously, we talk about a bunch of storylines here, but I just think a lot of this stuff is not a big deal personally. Lamar knows that game against the Chiefs is probably the biggest game of the year outside of divisional games. But in his answer during OTAs, he wasn't just saying, oh, whatever. It's whatever. But to him and to a lot, the mindset you have to have is it is just another game, right? Because it's one game at a time, 1 week at a time. If you make that game your Super Bowl, that's going to have negative implications on you, whether you win or whether you lose, right? It's one game at a time. You can understand the gravity of it, the magnitude of it, which it is. But at the end of the day, what's a regular season week 1 game going to be against the Chiefs when you're talking about having to beat them in the playoffs? That's not what Lamar said. That's what I'm saying. But it just seems like there's always something. And I don't know. If Lamar shows up this week for OTAs, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. we're just going to leave it at that. So obviously here we'll talk about whether he shows up or not. But again, going on these, long-winded, Mike Florio said this. I mean, I was done with it, right? I was just saying, okay, we talked about it on Friday and it was like, okay, well, at the end of the day, yeah, Lamar didn't show up and that's that. Is it a big deal? No, I said that on Friday. But now Mike Florio had that article and now that's the biggest storyline where now everybody's talking about Lamar and the money that he's losing and him not being there is getting more and more steam. So of course we're gonna have to talk about it here on the show. Coming up in the second segment, we'll move away from the Lamar controversy, get into some pass rushing options, interior and exterior. Could Calais Campbell come back or maybe another familiar face as well? Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. So the NBA Finals, you got the Celtics and the Mavericks. FanDuel has everything you're looking for, whether you want to bet Jason Tatum props, Luka Doncic props, Jaylen Brown, Kyrie Irving. Do you think the Mavs are going to win? Celtics, you can do all that over on FanDuel. Plus, for the Ravens, we know they're opening up against the Chiefs in week 1. Over on FanDuel, the Ravens open up at 2.5-point underdogs for that game. So if you want to get in on that line, or I'm sure it'll change over the next couple of months, be sure to get in on that over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/locked and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back, our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Monday. Really appreciate everybody again being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. Also, be sure to make Locked On Sports Today a part of your day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The biggest stories throughout all of sports. Peter Bukowski does a great job over there, so be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today for all of your sports updates. Now, let's get into some pass rushing news, I guess, for the Ravens. Not necessarily news, but some opinions. Now, Bleacher Report put out an article of some decent fits, best fits for the remaining, I think it was 30 or so free agents. And for the Ravens, there were a couple of pass rushing options on there, and both of them were familiar faces. Both guys spent time with the Ravens. Now, you can see if you're watching on YouTube on today's show ticker that Calais Campbell was one of them. Campbell's an interesting option. Now, look, I love Calais Campbell. I think he was awesome when he was in Baltimore, provided a lot for the Ravens, both on the field and off of it in the community as a leader. I mean, I think Calais Campbell, when you look back on him, like he is beloved within the Baltimore community. The way the Ravens interior pass rush room or just defensive line room sits right now, I don't know if there's a spot for him unless they want to keep 6 guys. I mean, you're always looking at moves to improve your team. I would love it if Campbell were to come back, but I think that would probably come at the expense of a Brent Urban. I really only see Baltimore keeping 5 defensive linemen this year. They did that last year, and the 5 were the exact 5 that I project to make the roster this season. Justin Madubuike, Travis Jones, Broderick Washington, Michael Pierce, and Brent Urban. There are just too many other spots. I mean, you can make the case to keep 6. You can also move Calais around a lot. Like, you can put him on the edge if you want to. I mean, obviously, I think he's a little better in the interior, but I think part of the reason why Justin Madubuike was able to flourish is because Calais wasn't taking his snaps. And that's, again, it's nothing against Calais, right? It's just those snaps needed to open up in order for Justin Madubuike to thrive. And I think if we are truly going to project a Travis Jones breakout this season, if they brought Calais Campbell back, I think that would kind of suppress that a little bit. Campbell still has something left in the tank, right? I know that he's up there in age. I know that he's nearing the end of his career. He's 37 years old. He'll turn 38 on September 1st. So he's, probably has a couple years left, maybe 1 year left. I don't know what the deal is going to be with him and if he even signs with the team this year. But last year with Atlanta, which is where he signed, he ended up not playing terribly. He actually played in all 17 games, was very durable, had 6.5 sacks, which, by the way, was more than he had in any single season with the Ravens. So I think that in a spot role, he'd be awesome, right? I think he's someone that can come in, take up space, get some run stops. I mean, we know he's a guy that has to be, at this point in his career, I mean, he's not as big of a threat as he was in his prime, but you still have to pay attention to him. If you're able to play those guys in tandem, that's fine. But I think the bigger picture of should the Ravens bring in either interior or talk about like exterior guys, like outside linebackers, edge guys of the pass rushing department, is there's already so much depth. You'd probably have to, again, get rid of some talented guys already. Now, I think that Calais Campbell and Brent Urban, like if you had to have that conversation, I feel like Calais would probably be a bit more beneficial for Baltimore, but Brent Urban has been awesome in a utility role for them over the last couple of years. He's found another home here in Baltimore after leaving and then coming back. He's established himself. So I don't know what the money's going to look like. Again, if I'm spending money, because that's the other thing, right? Calais Campbell, he would cost money to bring in. And you're already pretty set in your defensive line room. I'd rather see them bring in a safety, right? Justin Simmons is a guy. He was also named in that article. I'd rather see them maybe bring in some extra offensive line depth. If there's any other guy out there, Dalton Reisner signed with the Vikings, so that is not an option anymore. But I just feel like there are other rooms, and the Ravens right now have about $5-6-ish million in cap space. Cap space is tight for them right now. Not that they couldn't restructure anybody or make something happen, but if we're just talking about the space they currently have, it's tight. If you want to bring Campbell in and then try to find some safety depth and whatnot, I mean, if Campbell signs for the minimum, then okay. But I don't think Campbell's going to sign for the minimum. So I think where the Ravens are right now in the defensive line room is fine. Obviously, it's a feel-good story for Calais, right? You bring him back. Oh, it's such an awesome story. He's back. And which, again, I would love. But I just think there are smarter ways for Baltimore to spend their money. I'm not opposed to the move, but it's not the first move that I would make. Now, the other pass rushing name named in that Bleacher Report article was Yannick Ngakoue. Ngakoue is somebody that did not have a great stint with the Ravens, was traded over from the Minnesota Vikings. I think Minnesota got a 3rd and a 5th round pick out of that deal, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of investment there in Ngakoue, and it just didn't work out. Now, I think we have to be objective about the situation, first of all, when just talking about his stint with the Ravens. Don Martindale's system was not pass rusher friendly, was not edge rusher friendly. It was a situation where, they were asked to do a lot in that system in terms of either covering guys out of the, in the flats or being a very versatile piece. And Ngakoue is not very good against the run. And I think he was asked to play that role a little bit too much with Don Martindale there. I also think that the pass rush effectiveness of Ngakoue, when he was in Jacksonville, even Minnesota, when he was there, he was a great pass rusher. Seemed like in Baltimore, whenever he was there, he was a fingernail away, a hair away from getting a sack. But he could never get there. He could never fully get there. And that was the, I guess, frustrating part, because he's a very talented player. Obviously, the Maryland thing is big. But in Chicago last year, 4 sacks and also dealt with injuries. I think he didn't play in a ton of games for them. Well, he played in 13. That's not bad, actually. But it was a disappointing year relative to expectation, because in Indianapolis and Las Vegas the past 2 seasons, before going to Chicago, it was 10 sacks and it was 9.5 sacks. So the pass rush, it declined for him a bunch last year. I mean, I guess you could argue it declined 2 years ago from 10 to 9.5, but that's not a big difference. He's had at least 8 sacks in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I guess combined 6, 7. So 8 out of his 9 years in the NFL, he's had at least 8 sacks, which is good. But for what the Ravens need, they need 2-dimensional players, guys who can go up against the run and can be forces against the pass rush effectively. And for Ngakoue, we would probably, if we were to see Ngakoue sign with the Ravens, it would be in a Justin Houston type role, which, again, if they feel like they need a situational pass rusher, could Ngakoue be that for them? Yes. I think the Mike McDonald, Zach Orr system is much more friendly than what Don Martindale had to offer for his pass rushers. And I think it just allows guys to go hunt the quarterback. And that's what Ngakoue does. Plus, we saw this last year with Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy. A bunch of questions about what those 2 guys could contribute. But here, at the end of the day, it's, do they have enough room? You have Kyle Van Noy, you have Odafe Oweh, you have David Ajabo, you have Adisa Isaac, you have Tavius Robinson. All of these guys, Malik Ham already, I think, is on the outside looking in. Is there enough room for you to keep 6 pass rushers if you're the Ravens? I think that another veteran would be nice. For Ngakoue, I think there's a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths because of the way that his Baltimore stint went. But I do chalk that up to, it's not all Martindale's fault. Again, Ngakoue didn't play well enough. But at the end of the day, I do think that for the Ravens, I don't know. It would depend what he wants money-wise, because the Ravens with that $5 to $6 million in cap space, if he wants too much money, I'd rather go out there and either go with what you have or sign somebody who would cost a little bit less. So I'd rather go for safety depth. I'd rather go for offensive line depth if I'm the Ravens, maybe even a vet wide receiver if we're getting a little spicy. I think the pass rush is still an area that they could improve. Campbell or Ngakoue wouldn't be terrible moves, but it's a situation for me where I think Baltimore could spend that money elsewhere and it'd be more effective for the roster at this point. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we will talk about some early expectations for this Baltimore Ravens team. Stay tuned, plan to talk about on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Game Time. I'm super excited for the NBA Finals personally, and it'd be really cool to go to a game. Now, for Game Time, they make getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all them prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Now, for me, if I were to go to a game, I'd probably want to go to a closeout game, although, again, that's super hard to predict. So maybe the opening, like Game 1, I think that'd be cool. Now, for the Game Time app, there are plenty of other high-profile events, not just the NBA Finals. We got the Stanley Cup Finals going on. Obviously, in Baltimore, the Orioles are in full swing. The Ravens will be coming up soon as well. Plus, there are a ton of favorite features for me, and one of my favorites is last-minute deals. Save about 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Plus, the experience is really easy and easy to navigate over on Game Time with other features like flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Game Time ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off first purchase. So by again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spell LOCKEDO on NFL for $20 off first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. And the show is brought to you by DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround, or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? Well, we get the latter with DK Law Group. DK Law Group is a Maryland-based law firm who's redefining the legal process with their modern approach. DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They're tech-savvy. They treat clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions simple. DK Law Group is a woman-led firm with Diana Khan at the helm. Diana has been called an unparalleled legal expert by some. One of the things you'll quickly notice with DK Law Group is their transparent pricing. They believe in clarity and cost and no one left in limbo. DK Law Group knows that speed is key. By leveraging technology, DK Law Group streamlines the process to serve you better and faster. Contact DK Law Group today at DKLawMD.com. Locked On listeners can call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline Empowering Legacies. We're back here rounding out Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here. Appreciate everybody for being here again. I've been hosting this show now for almost 5 years. It's been a very long and exciting journey. Get back. I mean, August 2019, we go all the way back there. One of my first episode was. It's a lot different then than it is now. That's back when Lamar won his first MVP. We're now getting off of Lamar's second MVP. So we've had a lot of memories here on Locked On Ravens. If you've been with me every day again, if it's your first time or if somewhere in the middle, thank you for being along the journey with me. We're going places, still on Locked On Ravens, and it's really exciting to see how the show has grown audio form-wise. We started off, then we added video. Obviously, social media has been a big part of the show for me personally and the show itself. Subtext as well, where you can get exclusive updates. That's in the description below as well. Let's talk about some early expectations for this Ravens team, though. We're a couple months out. We just started June. Crazy to think we're only a couple months away from football season. It feels like forever since we've seen the Ravens play, because it has been forever, right? End of January when we last saw this team play. But there's a lot of controversy. We talked about controversy in the first part of the show, but controversy about just what the expectations should be set at for this team right now. And there are a couple different ways that you could prioritize how we look at expectations, maybe how you look at expectations. But to me, I think we have to start with, if you want to have a baseline, what should the minimum be for this team? Divisional round. That's that, and that still feels like a disaster, right? Divisional round feels like a step back, because it would be a step back. This team made the AFC Championship game. They finally got over the hump. But we're talking about low expectations. Even if you want to talk about they just have to make the playoffs, that is a low bar. Those are low expectations. Obviously, you want to have a successful regular season. You want to make the playoffs, but regular season doesn't matter for this team anymore. And I think that all the players understand that, and all the coaches understand that. Everybody should, right? It's what you do in the playoffs that counts. You can have the best regular season like we saw the Ravens do last season. Does not matter if you cannot get the job done when it counts in the playoffs. And last year, I think, again, it stung for so many people because of the fact that team just felt so perfect in so many ways. right? I mean, the roster felt incredible. The coaching staff was incredible. It just felt like everything was setting up for them to be the team. And then it came crashing down for them when it mattered most. So the expectation should be sky high this year, right? Just because they lost in the AFC Championship game does not mean that, oh, okay, just get there again and that's fine. That was last year. They can do it. They have been there. Now, the AFC is going to be as powerful as ever, right? Does this team get the 1 seed again? I'm not going to count them out for it, but I think it's going to be a whole heck of a lot harder to get it this year, considering how many quarterback injuries happen, how many teams retooled in the AFC. So for me, I don't know. It's going to be tough, but that doesn't matter. You punch your ticket to the playoffs and anything can happen. Just because you're the 1 seed doesn't guarantee you a Super Bowl appearance. I think to me, this is at least AFC Championship game or bust. And I kind of said that last year, where again, it's just like every year you don't win the big game with Lamar Jackson is a year that you're wasting of his prime, is a year you're losing out on what he can do on the field, because Lamar Jackson is awesome right now. He's not going to be like that forever. Nobody is like that forever, right? Even the all-time greats, they quote unquote slowed down a little bit when they got up there in age. And everybody exits their prime at different times. Everybody enters their prime at different times. But the same thing remains, as you cannot waste those years, especially with the roster that they have now. Where is it the perfect roster? No, it's not. No roster is perfect. But they have invested in the defense time after time after time. Obviously, we can talk about the wide receiver room and what the investments have been like there. Obviously, earlier in Lamar's career, I feel like they could have done more, especially with him on that rookie deal. But we're now. This is Lamar's 7th season, which is still crazy to think about. I mean, it feels like yesterday he was just drafted. But you want to be able to see this team exceed and go to the Super Bowl. I mean, if this team won the Super Bowl, that wouldn't even be exceeding expectations. It feels like that's where they are right now. They should have high expectations. This is a good team. This should be a team that competes for a Super Bowl every year as long as Lamar Jackson is healthy. And if it doesn't work out that way this season, there are going to be conversations about the coaching staff, about the roster, how it's constructed. So this is a big year. Again, it's not make or break, right? As long as you have Lamar, you have a chance. Lamar's in his prime. If they don't win it this year, it's not like they're not going to have a chance to next year or the year after that. As long as Lamar's healthy, they have a shot. But again, it's like winning a Super Bowl is so hard. You have to take advantage of what you have when you have it. And I think, look, the Chiefs have done that with Patrick Mahomes winning 3 Super Bowls. They've been able to do it. Can the Ravens do the same thing? Expectations for them should not just be, okay, make the playoffs and lose. Like, that's what it's been. And that hasn't been. I mean, they took a step forward here by getting over the divisional round hump. They hadn't made an AFC championship since the 2012-2013 year. They won the Super Bowl. That was the last time. They got over that hump this past year. If you take a step back, you win a wild card game, potentially you go to the divisional round and you lose, that's a step back. I mean, it is. So we'll have talk about expectations, throughout the course of the next couple of months leading up to the season, even probably during the year. But this team is going to have sky-high expectations. They deserve to have sky-high expectations. They're good enough to have sky-high expectations. And it's about how they perform. Obviously, the regular season is important, but it's what you can do in the playoffs, that is what matters for this team. That is the only thing that matters for this team, if we're being honest here. That's all I have here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form and audio form. We'll be right back here tomorrow talking more Ravens, having more Ravens content for you as always. So stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.